The last time I saw her, she was beautiful. 306 feet of steel and ambition, cutting through Caribbean waters like a knife through silk. The USS Cyclops, March 1918. I was perched on her crow's nest, invisible as always, watching the sun bleed orange across the horizon. I should have stopped what was coming. But some things need to disappear. I remember the smell of coal dust mixing with salt spray. It gets into everything. Your clothes, your lungs, your memories. The Cyclops was groaning that day, loaded down with 11,000 tons of manganese ore from Brazil. Manganese, such an innocent word for something that would drag 306 souls into the deep. Captain Worley stood on the bridge, his German accent barely hidden beneath years of practiced American English. George Washington Worley, not his real name of course, born Johann Friedrich Wichmann in Hanover. I'd watched him change his papers in San Francisco, 1898. 20 years of pretending, and now here we were, in the middle of a war where his birthplace mattered more than his oath. "She's riding too low," First Officer Enslow muttered, watching the waterline disappear beneath another load of ore. I was crouched behind him, close enough to smell the tobacco on his breath. He was right. The Cyclops was a collier built to carry coal, not this dense Brazilian earth that pressed her hull toward breaking. But orders were orders. The war machine needed manganese for steel, steel for ships, ships for victory. Nobody asked if the Cyclops could handle it. Nobody except Enslow, and he only asked in whispers. I've been following this ship for months, sliding through time to watch her story unfold. You see, some disappearances are accidents, some are conspiracies, and some are necessities that the universe arranges when humans refuse to see what's right in front of them. The crew was nervous. I could taste it in the air, that metallic tang of fear that comes before disaster. They'd lost their executive officer in Rio, court-martialed for murder. The replacement was green, untested. Half the crew were merchant sailors pressed into naval service. The other half actual Navy men who resented sailing under a captain they didn't trust. I watched Worley pace the bridge, his left hand twitching. An old injury, he'd tell anyone who asked. But I'd been there when he got it. Hamburg, 1889, a knife fight over forged shipping documents. Some wounds never heal right, especially the ones that come from living a lie. The manganese sat in the holds like a sleeping giant. Each chunk of ore was dense, angular, sharp enough to cut if you weren't careful. In the number 2 hold, I found Seaman Merritt staring at the pile, his young face creased with worry. "It shifts," he whispered to no one. Maybe he sensed me there. Some people can when they're close enough to their own ending. When we roll, it all shifts to one side, then back. Like it's alive. He was right to be afraid. Bulk cargo that shifts can capsize a ship in minutes. But manganese was special, so much heavier than coal, that the same volume weighed nearly twice as much. The Cyclops was carrying her death in her belly, and everyone knew it, except the one man who could have turned her around. Barbados, March 3, 1918. The last time anyone would admit to seeing the Cyclops above water. I stood on the dock, watching her take on coal and water. The British port officer, a thin man named Livingstone, was arguing with Captain Worley about the ship's condition. "Your port engine is disabled," Livingstone said, consulting his notes. "You're overloaded by at least 2,000 tons, and you're sailing into waters where German submarines have been spotted. I must formally recommend." "Your recommendation is noted," Worley cut him off, that German steel in his voice, barely concealed. "We sail with the tide." I could have whispered in Livingstone's ear, could have made him insist, made him impound the ship until repairs were complete. But I'd learned long ago that changing history is like trying to hold water. It always finds a way to flow where it needs to go. Instead, I climbed aboard one last time, moving through the ship like smoke. In the wireless room, I found radio operator Myers tapping out routine messages. The Cyclops had one of the most powerful radio sets afloat, capable of reaching stations thousands of miles away. After she disappeared, people would wonder why she never sent a distress signal. They assumed catastrophic failure, something so sudden that Myers never had time to reach his key. They were wrong. I watched Myers for an hour that night, noting the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. He'd been drinking more lately. They all had. When you're sailing on a coffin, sometimes rum is the only thing that makes the hours bearable. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Zelnick was performing miracles with baling wire and profanity. The port engine had been down for weeks, a cracked cylinder that should have been repaired in dry dock. Instead, they limped along on one engine, pushing a ship designed for 14 knots at barely 10. "She'll hold," Zelnick told his assistant, wiping grease from his hands. "She has to." But I could see what he couldn't. The hairline fractures spreading through the starboard engine mount, the mental fatigue that weeks of carrying double duty had caused. The Cyclops wasn't just overloaded and undermanned. She was dying from the inside out. That night, I found myself in Captain Worley's cabin. He was writing in his log, the careful script of a man documenting his own doom. I read over his shoulder, March 3, 1918, departed Barbados, 1630 hours. Weather fair, seas moderate. Course set for Baltimore. Crew restless but manageable. Port engine remains disabled. May God preserve us. God, I almost laughed. If God cared about preserving ships, I'd have been out of work millennia ago. Worley locked the log in his desk drawer and pulled out something else, a photograph, a woman and 2 children, somewhere in Germany. Not his American family, the one everyone knew about. This was his first family, the one he'd abandoned when he became George Washington Worley. He stared at it for a long time, then burned it in his lamp flame. The edges curled black, faces disappearing into ash. Some secrets he must have thought should go down with the ship. There were 306 souls aboard the Cyclops when she left Barbados. The manifest listed 293 crew and 13 passengers, but manifests, like captains, sometimes lie. I found him in the forward hold, tucked between crates of supplies. Passenger number 14, no name on any list, no record he'd ever existed, just a man in a worn suit clutching a leather satchel like his life depended on it, which, of course, it did. I'd been tracking him since Rio. Alfred Gottschalk. Though that wasn't his real name either. Amazing how many people on the Cyclops were pretending to be someone else. Gottschalk was a courier carrying something from the German embassy in Brazil to, well, that's where it gets interesting. The satchel contained documents, technical specifications, details about a new type of mine that could be triggered by a ship's magnetic signature. Revolutionary stuff in 1918. The kind of intelligence that could change the war's outcome. He should have taken a neutral ship. Should have gone through Argentina, then Spain, then home to Germany. But someone in Rio had gotten nervous, decided the fastest route was best. Hide him on an American ship where no one would think to look. No one except me. I sat with Gottschalk in that dark hold, invisible, but somehow he knew I was there. People carrying secrets often do. He clutched his satchel tighter, muttering prayers in German. It's not the documents that will kill you, I wanted to tell him. It's the weight of them. Because here's the thing about secrets. They're heavy. Heavier than manganese, heavier than steel. And the Cyclops was already carrying too much weight. I left him there and made my way to the mess hall, where the crew was eating their evening meal. The conversation was subdued, punctuated by the groaning of the hull as waves pressed against overloaded holds. Anyone else feel that? Seaman Davis asked, as the ship rolled a few degrees more than she should have. Feel what? Replied Bosun Maddox, though his knuckles were white around his coffee mug. Like she's listing to port. You're imagining things. But Davis wasn't imagining anything. I'd noticed it too. The manganese was shifting, slowly but surely. Each roll of the ship moved it a little more to port. And with the port engine dead, they couldn't adjust trim properly. The Cyclops was developing a permanent lean, like a drunk trying to walk straight. That night, I climbed to the bridge and found First Officer Ensalo on watch. He was staring at the compass, frowning. 15 degrees off, he muttered. No matter how I adjust, we keep pulling 15 degrees off course. Magnetic deviation. Common enough near large metal masses. But the Cyclops had never carried this much metal before. The manganese was creating its own magnetic field, strong enough to confuse the compass. They were sailing blind, trusting to dead reckoning and stars. If they could see the stars. I looked up. Clouds were building on the northern horizon. Not a storm, not yet. But weather has a way of finding ships that are already in trouble. March 4th, 1918. Somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore. The radio room was my favorite place on the ship. All those voices crackling through the static ships calling to shore, shore calling to ships. The whole Atlantic Ocean connected by invisible threads of electromagnetic energy. Radio operator Myers was at his station, headphones clamped over his ears. He was listening to traffic from Norfolk Naval Base, routine stuff about convoy positions and weather reports. Then something changed. I saw it in his face first, confusion, then concern, then something approaching fear. He pulled off his headphones and checked his equipment. Everything was working perfectly, but the voices were gone, all of them. The Atlantic Ocean, usually buzzing with radio traffic, had gone completely silent. Myers tried transmitting. USS Cyclops to any station, please respond. Nothing, not even static. It was as if the entire electromagnetic spectrum had simply stopped. I knew what this was. I'd seen it before, in other times, other places. The silence that comes before an unmaking. When reality itself holds its breath. Myers kept trying for an hour, then gave up and went to find the captain. I stayed behind, listening to the nothing. Sometimes, if you know how to hear it, silence tells you more than words ever could. The ship was changing. I could feel it in the rivets, the way they sang a different note than they had that morning. The manganese was doing something to the Cyclops, something beyond mere weight and magnetism. It was changing her fundamental frequency, the vibration that held her atoms together. I made my way down to the holds. The manganese ore sat in pyramids of dark possibility, each chunk a piece of Brazil's ancient heart. This wasn't ordinary ore. I should have realized it earlier. This came from the Minas Gerais region, where the earth holds memories older than continents. In the darkness of the hold, the manganese was glowing, not with light, that's the wrong word. It was glowing with absence, a darkness so profound it made the surrounding black seem gray by comparison. Seaman Merritt was there, the one who'd worried about shifting cargo. He was standing perfectly still, staring at the ore with eyes that reflected nothing. "Do you see it?" he whispered. I almost answered before remembering he couldn't see me, but it didn't matter. He wasn't talking to me anyway. "It's beautiful," he continued, "like looking at the space between stars." He reached out to touch the nearest chunk of ore. I could have stopped him. Should have, maybe. But some lessons can only be learned through experience. His hand passed through it, not around it, through it. As if the manganese wasn't quite there, wasn't quite real. Or as if Merritt wasn't. He pulled his hand back, staring at it in wonder. It looked normal, but I could see the difference. Part of him had been left behind in that impossible space, the place where the manganese really existed. "I need to tell someone," he said, and ran from the hold. He made it 3 steps before the universe noticed its mistake. Between one footfall and the next, Seaman Merritt simply ceased. No flash, no sound. Just there, then not there, like a pencil mark erased from reality's page. The manganese pulsed once, satisfied. I found Captain Worley in his cabin at midnight, staring at charts by lamplight. The charts were wrong, of course. They showed ocean where ocean should be, marked depths and currents and shipping lanes as if the world obeyed consistent rules. "Who's there?" he called out suddenly. I froze. In all my years of watching, few people had ever sensed my presence so directly. But Worley was staring right at where I stood, his eyes focused on nothing. "I know someone's there," he continued in German. "I felt you watching since Rio." "Interesting." I stepped sideways through time, just enough to blur my edges, and watched him relax slightly. He couldn't see me now, but he knew I hadn't left. "Are you from the company?" he asked. "From Berlin? I've done everything asked of me. The ship is exactly where it needs to be." Now that was very interesting indeed. A knock at the door interrupted us. First Officer Ensalo entered without waiting for permission, his face grave. "Captain, we've lost 3 more men." "Lost?" "Gone, sir. Vanished. Merritt from the forward hold, Kohler from the engine room, and Daniels from the galley. The crew is starting to panic." Worley's jaw tightened. "Desertion. They'll be found and court-martialed." "Sir, we're in the middle of the ocean. Where would they desert to?" "That's enough, Ensalo. Return to your duties." After Ensalo left, Worley pulled out a second logbook, this one hidden behind the false back of a drawer. He wrote quickly, in German, "The cargo is having the predicted effect. 3 absorbed so far. Estimate another 12-15 hours before critical mass achieved. God forgive me. So." Not just a captain with a secret past, a saboteur, carrying out orders that predated the war itself. The manganese wasn't just cargo. It was a weapon, though not the kind anyone in 1918 could understand. I thought about all the conspiracy theories that would spring up around the Cyclops. Enemy submarines, structural failure, mutiny, storm. None of them would come close to the truth, that she was deliberately sailed into an impossible space, a sacrifice to test weapons that wouldn't be theorized for another century. But even Worley didn't understand what he was really doing. His handlers had told him the manganese would create a magnetic anomaly, maybe disable enemy ships. The hen told him it would eat reality itself. The ship lurched suddenly, a movement that had nothing to do with waves. I felt it in my bones. The Cyclops was sliding sideways through dimensions, pulled by the growing wrongness in her hold. Worley felt it too. His hand shook as he closed the hidden logbook. "What have I done?" he whispered in English. Then, louder, in German, "What have you made me do?" But I wasn't the one he should be asking. By dawn on March 5th, the Cyclops was sailing through waters that didn't exist. Oh, they looked like water. Blue-green swells under a gray sky, whitecaps breaking against the hull. But water doesn't forget which direction is down. Water doesn't flow upward in spirals that hurt to perceive. I stood on deck, watching the crew try to make sense of what they were seeing. Some of them couldn't process it at all. Their minds simply edited out the impossibilities, showing them normal ocean where geometry was breaking down. Others saw too clearly. "The stars are wrong," Navigator Williams kept repeating, clutching his sextant. "They're in the wrong places, all of them." He was right. The stars were where they would be in about 50,000 years. The manganese wasn't just bending space, it was bending time, creating a bubble where past and future leaked into the present. More crew members were disappearing, not all at once now, but in pieces. Gunner's mate Thompson lost his left arm between breakfast and lunch, not severed, just absent, as if he'd always been one-armed. He didn't seem to notice until someone pointed it out. The radio silence had spread to all sounds. Voices faded mid-sentence. The engine's roar became a whisper, then nothing. By noon, the Cyclops was sailing in perfect silence, her remaining engine running without noise, the waves breaking soundlessly against her hull. In this impossible quiet, I heard Gottschalk screaming. I found him in his hiding spot, still clutching his satchel, but now the leather was aging decades with each heartbeat. His precious documents crumbled to dust, then reformed, then crumbled again in an endless cycle. "Make it stop," he begged the air. "I'll tell you everything. The codes, the contacts, the plans, everything." But the universe wasn't interested in German intelligence anymore. It had bigger fish to fry. The manganese was singing now, a vibration below sound that made reality hiccup. Each pulse erased a little more what the Cyclops was supposed to be. Rivets became suggestions, steel became memory. The boundary between ship and sea grew negotiable. I made my way to the bridge, where Captain Worley stood alone. Ensalo was gone, not disappeared, but transformed into something that might have been salt spray, or might have been a man-shaped hole in the air. "I was supposed to have more time," Worley said, not to me but to himself. "They promised I'd have time to get the crew to the boats." He pulled out a small device I shouldn't have been able to recognize, wouldn't be invented for 60 years. A magnetic field detector, crude but functional, its needle spinning wildly as it tried to measure the unmeasurable. 15,000 Gauss, he read. They said it would peak at 3,000. The manganese had exceeded all predictions. Instead of creating a localized magnetic weapon, it was unraveling the fundamental forces that held matter together. The Cyclops wasn't sinking. She was uncohering, becoming less real with each passing moment. "Can you stop it?" Worley asked the air. Asked me, though he couldn't know I was there. "Whoever you are, whatever you are, can you stop what's happening?" I could have. Maybe. Time travel gives you options, ways to nudge events before they cascade beyond control. But I'd learned the hard way that some disasters are necessary. They close doors that need closing, end paths that lead nowhere good. The Cyclops was carrying more than manganese and secrets. She was carrying the seed of weapons that would make atomic bombs look like firecrackers. If she reached Baltimore, if the right scientists saw what the ore could do, sometimes a mystery is the kindest ending. Reality gave up on the Cyclops at 1:47 in the afternoon on March 5, 1918. I know the exact time because that's when my own existence started fluctuating. Whatever the manganese was doing, it was affecting even me, and I'm considerably harder to affect than most things in this universe. The ship was a sketch now, a suggestion of steel and purpose. Half her crew had faded to outlines, going about their duties without noticing they could see through their own hands. The ocean beneath us was all possibilities at once. Calm and storming, deep and shallow, water and not water. In the cargo hold, the manganese had become something else entirely. A hole, not in the ship, but in everything. A perfect sphere of absence that grew with each pulse. The remaining crew gathered on deck, drawn by instinct to die under open sky. Maybe 20 of them left, out of 306. They stood in small groups, some praying, some silent, some laughing at jokes only they could hear. Radio operator Myers was there, still wearing his headphones, though they connected to nothing. "I can hear them," he said wonderingly. "All the messages that were never sent. All the words that were never spoken. They're beautiful." The ship's cat, because of course there was a ship's cat, walked through the crowd, purring. It was the only thing on the Cyclops that seemed completely unaffected. Cats have always been comfortable with impossible spaces. Captain Worley stood at the helm, hands on a wheel that no longer connected to a rudder that no longer existed. His face was calm now, accepting. "I thought I was saving Germany," he said to no one. To me. To the cat. "They told me the manganese would change the war. They didn't say how." The hole in the cargo hold reached critical mass at 2:03 p.m. I felt it happen. Reality cracked like ice under spring sun, not breaking but transforming into something that had never been solid to begin with. The Cyclops fell through herself. There's no other way to describe it. She became a ship, falling through a ship, falling through a ship. An infinite recursion of steel and souls cascading into spaces, between spaces. The manganese sang triumph as it pulled 306 lives into its impossible heart. I should have gone with them. For a moment, I was tempted to finally stop witnessing, stop remembering, stop being the one who watches while others cease. But that's not my role. I'm the witness. I stay behind to remember what everyone else forgets. The last thing I saw was Seaman Davis, the one who'd noticed the list. He was smiling as he dissolved, finally understanding something the rest of us were too solid to grasp. "Oh," he said, "that's what it was all for." Then nothing. Ocean without a ship. Sky without a blemish. Perfect blue emptiness where 306 souls had been. I floated there for a while, watching the water heal itself. No debris. No oil slick. No evidence the USS Cyclops had ever existed except in records and memories that would fade like morning fog. The manganese was gone too, returned to whatever dimension it had come from. But I could still feel its echo, a wrongness in the water that would persist for decades. Ships would avoid this patch of ocean without knowing why. Compasses would spin. Radios would whisper. The Bermuda Triangle was born that day, though it would take humanity another 40 years to name it. I was in Washington when the Navy declared the Cyclops missing, March 13, 1918, a week after she fell through reality. They'd expected her in Baltimore on March 7th. When she didn't arrive, they assumed weather delays. By March 10th, they were worried. By March 13th, they knew. No trace. Admiral Griffin told the assembled press. No wreckage, no survivors, no distress signal. She simply vanished. The theories started immediately. German U-boats topped the list. Convenient, given the war. Some suggested mutiny, pointing to Worley's German birth and the crew's low morale. Others blamed structural failure, noting the overloading and disabled engine. All wrong, all right. When you can't tell the truth, every lie becomes equally valid. I attended the memorial service in Norfolk. 306 names read aloud, while families wept for bodies they'd never bury. Worley's American wife stood straight-backed and dry-eyed, her children clutching her hands. She knew something, I think, not the truth, but enough to be unsurprised. The investigations went on for years. The Navy interviewed every person who'd seen the Cyclops in Barbados, examined every similar disappearance, chased every rumor of survivors on Caribbean islands. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. The Cyclops hadn't sunk, she'd ceased. The difference mattered to no one but me. I kept tabs on the aftermath. The families who never stopped hoping. The sailors who refused to sail that stretch of ocean. The scientists who noticed magnetic anomalies but couldn't explain them. And the Germans. Oh yes, I watched them very carefully. Gottschalk's handlers waited months for him to surface. When he didn't, they assumed the mission had failed, that their magnetic weapon test had gone wrong. They were right. Just not in the way they imagined. The program was quietly shuttered. The scientists involved were reassigned to more conventional weapons. The research that might have led to dimensional weapons 50 years early was filed away and forgotten. Sometimes the best outcome is nothing happening at all. But the Cyclops left echoes. Ships and planes would disappear in that patch of ocean for decades to come. Not all of them. That would be too obvious. Just enough to keep the mystery alive, to make people wonder what hungry thing lived in those waters. Some probably found the same hole the Cyclops fell through. Others just had bad luck in dangerous seas. The human mind loves patterns even where none exist, especially where none exist. I went back to the site in 1945 after the war ended. 5 Navy Avenger torpedo bombers vanished in perfect weather, followed by the rescue plane sent to find them. Flight 19, they called it. I watched them fly into the same wrongness that had taken the Cyclops, their compasses spinning, their radios fading to static. "We can't find West," the flight leader transmitted. "Everything is wrong." Yes, I thought. Everything is wrong here. It has been since March 5, 1918. The Bermuda Triangle became legend after that. Books, movies, documentaries, all trying to explain the unexplainable. Ancient aliens, Atlantis, time warps, methane bubbles, electronic fog, all of them dancing around the truth that sometimes the universe makes mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are hungry. I went back one last time in 1968, 50 years after the Cyclops disappeared. The ocean looked the same. Blue water, White clouds, nothing to mark where 306 people had fallen out of reality. But I could still feel it. The scar in space-time, mostly healed but never quite right. A yacht was sailing through, a young couple out of Miami. They waved at nothing, probably thinking they saw another boat. The woman shivered despite the warm sun. "Let's go around," she told her husband. "I don't like it here." Smart woman. Some people can sense the places where reality got thin. I dove down, following the water column to where the seafloor should be. The Cyclops wasn't there, of course. She wasn't anywhere. But I found something else. A piece of manganese ore, a single chunk that had somehow escaped the unmaking. It sat on the sandy bottom, impossibly black, still carrying that vibration of wrongness. I should have left it alone. Should have let the ocean bury it in sediment and time. But I'm the witness. I collect memories, even the dangerous ones. I picked it up. The visions hit immediately. Not the past. I'd already seen that. This was the future that almost was. The timeline where the Cyclops reached Baltimore, where scientists studied the manganese and learned to weaponize reality itself. Cities unraveling, armies falling through themselves, wars fought with weapons that deleted rather than destroyed. A world where the atomic bomb was never needed because we had something worse. I saw why the universe had reached out and swallowed the Cyclops. Some knowledge arrives too early. Some doors open onto rooms we're not ready to enter. The manganese crumbled in my hand, its purpose finally complete. The last evidence of what had really happened to the USS Cyclops dissolved into the Caribbean current. But the stories remained, they always do. Every year someone claims to have found the Cyclops. They never have. They find other wrecks, older or newer, and project their hopes onto rusted steel. The families of the 36 grow old and die, taking their grief with them. The mystery becomes history, becomes legend, and somewhere, in the spaces between what was and what is, the Cyclops still sails. I see her sometimes when the light is just wrong and reality hiccups. A ghost ship crewed by absences, carrying cargo that doesn't exist to a port she'll never reach. Captain Worley still stands at the helm, finally free of the lies that defined his life. The crew goes about their duties, unaware they're echoes of echoes. And in the cargo hold, the manganese sings its impossible song, forever falling through itself, forever taking everything with it. They're not ghosts. Ghosts are what remain when someone dies. The crew of the Cyclops did something else. They uncohered, became spread across possibilities like butter scraped over too much bread. In a way, they're still out there. All of them. Seaman Merritt touching ore that touches him back. Radio operator Myers listening to the silence between stations. First Officer Enselo trying to chart a course through waters that don't admit to direction. And Gottschalk, still clutching his satchel full of secrets that no longer matter to anyone, anywhere, anywhen. I suppose that's how it happened, or how I remember it anyway. The truth, it's never where you think it is. Until next time, The Witness.